The following program is a production of WMFE, Orlando, Melbourne, Daytona Beach.
Central Florida power bills are on the rise.
Just hope I'll be able to pay it.
The problem is simple. A growing population means power going to more homes, and those already living here are using more electricity.
And let's face it, every time we go shopping anymore, it's mostly something we buy that we plug in.
Coal and natural gas power plants are the largest sources of energy in Florida, and running them is getting more expensive. The overall cost of fuel jumped 25% over the last 4 years alone. But another issue is also on people's minds.
The environment is being destroyed through global warming. If we don't take care of this planet, it's not going to take care of you.
A big part of the national debate centers on energy policy. But right here in Florida, there's already a shift toward cleaner energy use. Yet the obvious answers aren't always the easiest or the most popular.
Building a nuclear plant is very cost prohibitive without some kind of incentive or some kind of tax credit.
This week on WMFE, discover what's stopping solar from sweeping the Sunshine State, who will be paying for more nuclear power plants, and why new home builders have no choice but to build energy smart. It's all part of what's powering Central Florida's future. A special report from WMFE's This Week.
Support for This Week is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to WMFE from viewers like you. Thank you.
Look around Deltona, and you can't help but notice the glistening solar panels dotting the rooftops. Over on Gage Avenue, it's another sign of solar progress. Technicians are installing yet another panel, part of a system that uses the power of the sun to heat water. Donnie Noli has been selling these systems in Central Florida for a decade.
The city limits of Deltona is #1 in the state. It has more solar hot water than any place.
Nearly 10% of Deltona families have installed these hot water systems called solar thermal. Tom Knock has been a happy customer for 9 years. He says Noli convinced him the solar thermal system would save him a lot of money over time.
He was saying that it was going to be like a $35 savings a month, and so it would pay for itself in like 4 or 5 years. And so we went ahead and went with it.
Systems like this can save households up to 85% on their water heating costs. But according to industry estimates, just 2% of Florida families have actually invested in one. The reason? Cost. They require a huge upfront investment, and most people, like Deltona resident Danielle Powell, just can't afford it.
Oh Lord, I don't have $5,000.
Solar thermal systems range from $4,000 to $7,000, depending on size. Noli says this system is the right size for a family of 4, and he's already looking ahead to the family's next solar move.
What we wanted to do was leave some of this space open for the future, for solar electric, you understand? So we could come back, once they're done with this phase, hopefully they'll be happy, and then we'll be able to come back and do the solar electric.
76.5 kW.
And solar electric panels are exactly what East Orlando resident Jack Degnan has just invested in. These brand new panels use a different technology than solar thermal. These can actually generate power for everything Degnan uses in his home. He has a simple motivation for spending tens of thousands of dollars on this system.
Money. I hope that it will reduce my electric cost to an approximate zero.
So far, hardly anyone in Florida has been willing to spend such a large sum on solar panels. Fewer than 500 of the 8.5 million homes in Florida have a solar electric system. Degnan's neighbor, Mark Cornell, is one of the few. He's had his powerful system for several months.
In my case, spend about $100,000, which is a lot, but in the long range, it's a saving. So the way I view it is, you pay a little more now and save a whole lot later.
Solar panels like the ones on Cornell's house are expensive because of the materials needed to make them. Thermal panel systems contain pricey metals like copper, which is now selling at record prices. As for solar electric panels, around 45% of the expense is due to the price of pure silicon, the same material used in computer chips. Factories around the world can only refine so much silicon, and right now the solar industry is competing with the technology sector to buy the valuable commodity. A spokesman for the Longwood-based Florida Solar Industries Association says many Floridians want to go solar, but the price is holding them back.
After all, we live here in the Sunshine State. We've got a great asset here with the sun, and we're just not using it.
Bruce Kirschner says he's optimistic that will change, especially in today's political climate. Just months ago, a new law designed to encourage net metering went into effect.
This is our power meter.
Net metering works like this. At times, solar users like Cornell generate more electricity than they can use, while at other times, like at night, they don't generate enough. Net metering allows them to sell the excess electricity back to the utilities at the same rate at which they'd buy power, offsetting the cost of buying electricity when they need it. Cornell says he gets the most bang for his buck during the hottest part of the day when demand for power is at its peak.
We've had both our air conditioners running at one time, and we've still been selling power back. So I think that's really a great thing.
Before Florida legislators passed the new net metering law, Cornell could only sell excess power at a much cheaper wholesale rate. This did little to offset costs when he had to use the electricity from the grid. Cornell's happy this has changed.
As the price of energy goes up and the more I sell back, that'll be a good thing for me.
Another good thing for Cornell, he's expecting a rebate check from the state for his solar electric system. Households can get up to $20,000, while businesses can get up to $100,000, or at least they could. Earlier this year, state lawmakers allocated $5 million for the solar rebate program, double the amount when it started just 2 years ago. But every penny was spoken for the moment the money was in the bank. That's because the waiting list from the previous year was so long.
We saw people really clamoring, and they had this pent-up demand for solar.
State lawmakers will consider approving more money for the program during the next session. Doing so has popular support, according to research commissioned by the solar industry. A Mason-Dixon poll shows 86% of Central Floridians think the government should encourage investment in solar technologies. The same percentage also supports the solar industry's idea of paying for incentives with $1 a month fee added onto power bills.
As little as $1 a month on your electric bill could get us over $100 million. And we could really do a lot in deploying solar on the rooftops with that type of funding.
The proposed $1 a month charge would go into a public benefit fund to help individuals pay for solar panels on their homes. But the idea has little traction in Tallahassee.
Quite frankly, with the legislature, it's been tough. They view that as a tax.
While incentives from the state have run out, there's still strong support for solar here in Central Florida. The Orlando Utilities Commission, Orange County government, and the city of New Smyrna Beach each offer their own financial incentives. Progress Energy offers a $450 rebate for customers who switch to solar hot water.
When you have an electric company ask you to quit buying their product and willing to pay you to quit buying their product to put your own power plant up, that was probably the best statement there was. Florida Power and Light was really anti-solar. They just did not want it to happen. And I just want you to realize that they're kind of the enemy.
Right now, Florida Power and Light doesn't offer any solar rebates to its customers, but it used to. A spokeswoman said the company continued funding an incentive program until 1994. She says customers lost interest in the program, so the program was terminated. Another financial incentive will not terminate this year as originally planned. President Bush just signed into law an 8-year extension of the tax credit for solar technology. The law allows people to offset 30% of the cost of new solar equipment, but Kirschner hopes it's not the end of federal support for solar.
Well, as an industry, we would like to see more done, but this, I think, is key to keeping the momentum going here in Florida.
Industry supporters compare solar technology to the rise of the personal computer. Once outrageously expensive, big, and bulky, computers are everywhere now. But even the industry admits solar isn't the ultimate solution for all of Florida's future energy needs.
Keep in mind, solar is not going to be the silver bullet. It's not going to be the answer to end all, when it comes to our energy crisis that we're in. But it's certainly a large piece of the puzzle.
The future amount of that large piece of the puzzle will pale in comparison to other energy sources. Kirschner says for now, the solar industry is aiming to make up a mere 4% of total energy production in Florida by 2025. By then, estimates show non-renewable sources will still make up more than 80% of our energy supply. That's including nuclear power, a source that will soon play a larger role here in Florida. Castleberry resident Sylvia Jones thinks twice before switching on a light, making coffee, or even turning on the TV. That's because power company rate hikes are taking more and more money from her monthly income.
Well, all of the utilities have climbed over the years that I've been here, you know.
Even so, Jones' power bills are topping $145 a month. Soon, they could jump to $180 a month. It's all because Progress Energy won government approval this week to raise its rates by 1/4. Florida Power and Light and the Orlando Utilities Commission also sought significant increases. More than 6.5 million Floridians will be affected. Progress Energy's rate hike is due in large part to plans to build a new nuclear power plant in Levy County. It would help supply electricity to customers statewide. The cost? $17 billion. Customers like Jones will be paying for the plant thanks to a new fee included in Progress Energy's 25% rate hike. That has Jones worried.
I'm a widow on a fixed income, and it's going to put a real hardship on me and the other people who are out here on a fixed income, and just hope I'll be able to pay it.
The Progress Energy plant will be similar to this one in South Florida. The company will start collecting the extra cash to pay for it in January, even though construction is still 2 or 3 years away. That's because of the lengthy process involved in getting a nuclear power plant approved. All this means customers will end up paying for a power plant that won't be supplying power for nearly 10 years.
I'll never see any use from it, but maybe my grandchildren.
Companies can charge customers extra for costs to develop new power sources because of a law passed 2 years ago. State Senator Paula Dockery voted in favor of it. She says the law is fair to consumers, but only if it helps them in the end.
For-profit companies should not be getting taxpayer dollars that go to their bottom line. They should be getting incentives for diversifying our energy source so that they can bring the price of energy down.
Dockery is a former member of a committee that oversees the Public Service Commission. She says the cost of new forms of energy is so expensive that private companies can't develop them solely with their own money.
When they use up those profits for the investment, then the price of electricity is going to go up anyway. I mean, it's all the same pot. Whether it's up front or at the tail end is really what we're arguing about here.
Power companies everywhere are scrambling for new sources of energy because of the rising cost of fossil fuels used in power plants like this, FP&L's natural gas plant near Sanford. Coal and natural gas are the most widely used fuels. The Department of Energy says the price of coal is up 40%, natural gas 31%. And Progress Energy predicts overall demand for electricity will jump by 25% over the next 10 years. Progress isn't the only one spending big to find new sources of power. On Kennedy Space Center property, Florida Power and Light will have a solar electricity plant by 2010. The plant is one of 3 the company plans to build with a combined price tag of $688 million, which FP&L will directly pass along to customers. That's unfair, according to Lonnie Thompson of consumer watchdog group, Florida Consumer Action Network.
It doesn't make sense. It's almost like if you're going to buy a house, the builder's saying, well, you give me the money up front and I'll build the house and give it to you in 10 years.
Thompson also says companies like Progress Energy have enough cash of their own to fund these projects. Last year, Progress Energy made profits of $500 million, enough for it to increase the new CEO Bill Johnson's paycheck 30%. All of which has Thompson angry that consumers are picking up the tab for a plant owned and operated by a private company, who he says should be paying for it from its own pocket.
Their shareholders could pay for it. They've got shareholders, investors who should be taking on a larger portion of the cost of that. There is no benefit to the users for paying for this service. You may be in the area, but let's say 10 years from now when this goes on the line, will you be in the area? So will you still be in their service area?
This isn't the first time Florida power companies have asked customers to pony up extra for clean energy. In 2004, Florida Power and Light started an optional Sunshine Energy program. Consumers could contribute an amount per month, supposedly, to fund development of renewable power sources. But earlier this year, state regulators stepped in and stopped the program. They found an FP&L contractor spent most of $11.4 million on marketing and not on renewable energy sources. Thompson doesn't want the same thing to happen with Progress Energy, especially since cost estimates for its nuclear power plant already grew by 325% since it was first proposed.
When they initially proposed it, that it was going to be $4 billion. Now it's up to 17. If you've got someone else footing the bill, you don't know what they're going to be doing. So cost overruns don't really matter.
The AARP told WMFE it is also watching the proposed rate hikes closely and won't hesitate to intervene on behalf of consumers if necessary. And the Consumer Action Network is concerned about who is going to be hit hardest by the increase.
Lower income people who can't budget that. If you've got their own costs there with additional gas costs, health insurance costs, and now utilities.
Progress Energy says nuclear power is the cheapest way to produce electricity, and it will help stabilize fuel prices. The company says the charges related to new energy will all come out in the wash and eventually save customers $1 billion in fuel costs a year. But Sylvia Jones says she's heard that spiel before.
Well, I remember when they first built the first nuclear plant in Virginia. They told us that our bills would be so cheap that you would not even see the meter running. That didn't happen.
If Central Florida customers do see savings, it won't be for many years. But with the rate hikes looming, Jones says she'll have to make changes now to avoid higher bills.
If I get a little hot, I cut the fans on and I do other things, or I'll just go out to the mall or go shopping.
And she doesn't think she'll be alone.
I don't think it will cut back on my medicine or anything like that. I won't be that hard hit, but a lot of people will, and that's really sad.
Roberto Carrion shares this beautiful home with his wife on Lake Apopka. But it's not just any other upscale home in Lake County. What you can't tell looking from the outside in is that the home is the creme de la creme when it comes to energy efficiency.
We did go over the top. We implemented a lot of energy efficiency things, but I was very passionate about it.
The roof is lined with spray foam insulation, essentially sealing the home vacuum tight so air doesn't escape. The windows are double paned low E glass, which lets light in but keeps a lot of the sun's heat out. And the list goes on. Sure, it costs the Carrions more up front, but payback's coming on the electric bill for this huge home.
This home is a large size home, okay? It's 5,500 square feet under AC. All right. Our electrical cost on a monthly basis right now is a little bit more than $300, which is fantastic. I mean, there's people who I know who live in homes this size and they're paying $1,000.
And we've all heard the saying, close the door, we're not cooling down the neighborhood. But industry leaders say the average home today is doing just that, even with the door closed. At this moment, air is likely seeping out of small leaks in your home's ducts, costing the average homeowner nearly $50 a year. More energy is lost through low-grade windows and poor insulation. This is why Carrion thinks it's not a bad idea if the government raises building standards to ensure homes are built with higher energy efficiency. And state lawmakers are trying to do just that by way of a new law they passed earlier this year. It requires significant improvements to the Florida Building Code. For good reason, according to the woman who used to manage the state's energy policy.
If you look at where our carbon emissions come from, 40 to 60% of those emissions come from energy used in buildings. And so since it's the largest part of the problem, it's going to be the most effective part of the solution.
Former Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection Colleen Castile says whether home builders like it or not, these energy-saving measures will be required for new homes as early as 2009. The rules force builders of new homes to improve energy efficiency by 50% over 10 years. This can include measures like installing solar water heating, energy-efficient appliances, programmable thermostats, and energy-efficient lighting systems. While the specific requirements are still being worked out, Castile says implementing them is very doable.
I think implementing standards on a phased-in approach is really the best way to accomplish the least cost with the most effective results. Also, it makes it a little easier on the manufacturers to be able to implement that standards that are implemented on a phased-in approach.
A retirement community in Lake County is ahead of the energy efficiency curve. the Lakes of Mount Dora claims to be at least 15% more efficient than current code. Operations Director Steve Hogeboom says that's how the community qualified for the government-backed Energy Star program.
This community has 1,000 homes. It would be like taking 250 homes out of this community as far as the energy usage.
The Coopers live in the Lakes of Mount Dora now. They retired here from Ohio and admit they didn't know much about energy efficiency until buying a house similar to this model home. They say they're more than pleased with their electric bill in their nearly 1,900 square foot home.
Since we moved in, we've been using around 450 kilowatt hours a month or less. So our bills, we've had one bill over $100.
But to afford buyers the luxury of lower energy bills, Pringle Development spends approximately $6,000 to $9,000 more per home during construction. More energy efficient materials like tankless water heaters and radiant barriers simply cost more. And just months away, the state will require all developers to spend more on energy efficiencies. During this troubled economy, the Home Builders Association is not thrilled about the mandates.
Most builders tend to not like to be mandated. They like to do things at their own pace and in their own way.
Jim Raymond is part of Lake County's chapter of the Florida Home Builders Association. The association and Florida's Green Building Coalition both publicly state that building green should not be government mandated. They fear new requirements of the Florida Building Code will significantly increase the cost of building new homes, putting ownership out of reach for many.
We are in a downturn of an economy, and certainly that makes homes more expensive for people to buy. But if we look at the long-term health consequences of both our environment and our human health will be impaired if we don't do something now about improving energy efficiency.
I'm comfortable. I would like to see everyone else get comfortable with it, you know, and not maybe be so combative with mandates that are coming down the road, and just adjust and get down to the business of getting on board. Because if they're not on board, they're going to get left behind on the platform for sure.
Although the new law is sparking debate among new home builders, it requires nothing at all for existing homes built to lower standards. In Central Florida alone, there are approximately 1.4 million homes already standing, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Of those, only 7,000 homes voluntarily adhere to higher standards.
Well, there are no mandates for improving energy efficiency in existing buildings, but there certainly are incentives for doing that.
The incentives will come in handy if you're remodeling your home. Any major remodel will have to be up to current code. Progress Energy offers up to $150 for duct repairs, or up to $300 for upgrading insulation. The upgrades mean energy savings on your electric bill, but Raymond has concerns that transient homeowners in Florida might not be interested.
The problem that we have is nobody sits still long enough to benefit from their upfront investment. You know, if we would sit still a little bit longer, it wouldn't be an issue at all.
One thing everybody seems to agree on is that something has to be done to reduce the state's carbon footprint.
I think it used to be 20 years ago, people talked about gloom and doom in the future, and most people didn't believe it. I think now people are seeing that we really need to change our ways.
It's just that if government does do some regulation now, then that will help. Then maybe they won't need to do as much in the future.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something.
It's the right thing to do for future generations, period.
We've all felt the breeze that comes with afternoon storms here in Central Florida, but these winds are far from being a reliable power source like in other parts of the country. Our winds just aren't consistent enough. Even so, Central Floridians are contributing to the rise of wind power elsewhere across the country.
The fuel's for free. It's the air, it's the wind.
Oviedo resident Mike Revac is one of them. He heads up the wind power division at Siemens North American headquarters in East Orlando. It's here that engineers design turbines, and the sales team markets wind power products to energy companies across the U.S. Revac used to be the only person in the wind power division.
Grown from me to over 700 people. It's exciting. I mean, it's clean technology. We're creating jobs. You know, we're creating manufacturing capacity in the U.S.
Siemens' Orlando-based power generation unit is part of a growing and lucrative renewable energy sector. The American Wind Energy Association says the industry has grown by an average of 29% per year over the last 5 years. That's due to big government subsidies to wind producers, who got $666 million in tax credits last year, more than any other renewable energy source. And the Department of Energy says wind generation will increase by 300% over the next 20 years. Siemens installed 375 wind turbines last year, yet Atlanta-based GE Energy is still the U.S. market leader. Now CEO Randy Zwirn says Siemens is working to get a bigger piece of that pie.
We're in the midst of starting up a significant number of new projects around the U.S. We have 2 brand new factories which we built in Iowa to build over 1,000 megawatts a year of wind turbines. And all of the engineering, marketing, project management support for all of that activity will be done here in Orlando.
I want to talk to you about a huge problem.
Wind power has been receiving a lot of national attention thanks to oil man T. Boone Pickens. He's been lobbying the government to make a $1.2 trillion investment in wind farms, all of which would be good for the environment, but also good for companies like Siemens.
The Pickens plan, which we actually support, is to be able to develop the wind resource and as a result of that divert natural gas to a transportation fuel. Siemens has had discussions with Pickens as well as a number of the other big developers.
One of those developers is a company called E.ON. Earlier this month, Siemens agreed to provide E.ON with hundreds of turbines that will soon pop up across the U.S. Juno Beach-based Florida Power & Light is also a Siemens client. Right now, FP&L is the largest generator of wind power in the country. Central Florida workers are helping to make all this happen, and that's music to the ears of local economic development leaders.
As the world moves forward to look for different ways, alternative energies and fuels, wind is really becoming on top. It's cheaper than solar even, and even though it's not something that we could probably use here in Florida, or it's not going to happen here in Florida, to have those manufacturers located here that make the components that are going to be used worldwide is going to be huge for us.
And while Central Florida has an economic stake in the rise of wind power, it won't meet our energy needs anytime soon. So now the pressure is building to find out what will. Solar power seems to be the brightest option.
The sun's going to be around for another 4+ billion years. It's free energy.
But solar's massive upfront cost is dimming its popularity. Ambitious plans to build nuclear power plants are in full swing, though advocates object to the $17 billion cost consumers will likely bear.
I think that's going to be very tough for people to swallow.
A new state law means more energy-efficient home building in our growing region. But with upgrades come expenses, and developers worry new homes for Central Floridians will slip out of reach. Whatever the solution, Central Floridians just hope an energy fix comes soon.